Indie Author Lab from the Alliance of Independent Authors is a brand new in-person event for indie authors during London Book Fair Week. Taking place in London on March 11, 2026, it's a full day of mentoring, workshops, and community connection. Created for indie authors by indie authors. Learn more and secure your tickets at selfpublishingadvice.org/indieauthorlab. Welcome to Self-Publishing with ALLi from the Alliance of Independent Authors. This week, it's our advice stream focusing on editing and design. Discover how you can apply best practices in these first stages of the publishing process to ensure the excellence of your work and its ability to appeal to your target readership. Hi, I'm Howard Lovy, and this is the editing and design stream of the Self-Publishing with ALLi podcast. I'm taking over hosting duties for this stream from Maddie Dalrymple, who's done a terrific job shaping these conversations, and I'm glad to be stepping in. A bit about me: I'm an author, a developmental editor, and a writing coach. I work with authors at different stages of their careers, often helping them sort out an early and sometimes confusing question: what kind of editorial help do I actually need right now? One issue that comes up again and again is whether a manuscript calls for a full developmental edit or whether an assessment or evaluation makes more sense as a first step. And that's what I want to explore today. And my guest is Tim McConnehey, founder and CEO of Izzard Inc. Publishing. Tim works with authors on a range of publishing services, including manuscript evaluations, and he's thought a lot about how assessments can help authors make clearer, more practical decisions before moving forward with editing and design. Hi, Tim. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Sure. Well, to start off, before we go into the topic, can you talk a little bit about your background and how you came to Izzard Inc.?
Oh boy, that's a good one. We've been in business for over a decade. I just happened to know an author. This was way back when ebooks were taking off. I just happened to know an author who we could work with, and we converted everything to ebooks. Things started to sell, and then I go, oh, there's got to be a better way for publishing. It started looking like there were cracks in the structure of how publishing worked, at least traditional publishing. And that's where things started. And we've just worked at it. And here we are today running Izzard Inc., which is a really great company. And I love it.
What kind of services do you offer?
Well, we offer, Izzard means Z. So we offer anything that an author needs from beginning to end. So we encompass everything that you need. We have a really great creative structure, and then we build the team around that creative structure who would have specific genre experience. So number one bestsellers, let's say in fiction or nonfiction, we build that team around our creative structure.
When an author first comes to you and says, here, I've been working on this for 10 years or a month or however long they've been working on it, how do you help them figure out what services they need first?
We really like to start thinking of how would an acquisition editor handle something. So that's why we ask them to come in and we say, let's look and see where your manuscript's at. Let's see where the strengths are. Where are the weaknesses at? Let's see the areas that you want help with. Is it landing? Is it connecting with your reader? So we usually like to start at the manuscript assessment stage, and then that dovetails into our action plan, which gives a clear path on how to move forward. So we try and assess and do this before somebody gets in and says, whoa, maybe I don't want to spend thousands of dollars publishing yet because I'm not sure where my content's at. So we want to make sure that the content's great. That's where we start.
So a manuscript assessment is necessarily a first step before a full developmental edit, or do you decide based on the quality of the manuscript?
Well, we have found by doing a manuscript assessment, it helps get in to the author's head a little bit of where does this go in the marketplace? How does this work? And we have over 90% of our authors actually revise the manuscript before working with a developmental editor. Mm-hmm. So if you see how it's broken down, it's not just problems. This is a little bit different than assessments that we've seen that others do. We point out what the problems are. We point out how to fix those issues and what needs to be done. So we have found that authors use this as a chance to revise before enlisting the help. And that way they get the most out of hiring the editor.
Mm-hmm. Now, is that a separate service that you charge for, or is it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that is a separate service that we charge for. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, right. And for me, that's a separate service as well. But, I approach it a little differently in that a lot of beginning authors are eager to jump straight into a developmental edit, but they're not always ready for that kind of work yet. So often what they need is a first clear big picture assessment to understand where the manuscript stands and how to focus on it. At the same time, I've also seen more experienced authors choose a manuscript evaluation because they just want a fresh set of eyes and practical recommendations without committing to a full deep edit. I handle them at the beginning level and at the advanced level.
I think you're dead on there. I think you are. So that's where I was like, where can I add value here?
Yeah. Well, I'm just wondering if that level, if you have more experienced authors who say, okay, I've already been through all that, or I'm experienced enough to not need a full developmental edit, do you offer only a manuscript evaluation?
Yeah, we do. We really do. But we have found that even the folks who have written half a dozen books get quite a bit of information out of the assessment. One of the things that I think we found over probably the last 4 or 5 years of really after we changed our business model and we've really pushed doing the assessment first and the strategic plan is this has been the key of our authors landing. 83% of them or so land in the top 10 to 15% of literary reviews. So we just had a first-time author come through. We did the assessment, matched him with an editor that worked on #1 bestsellers. And today I just got word that Kirkus is going to feature his book in the March 15th issue that's coming out. And that's a very consistent story. And I think that's an undertold message in publishing with the assessment is they should look at this more like a strategic plan. How do I assemble to hit my goals? What are my goals first? Mm-hmm. How do I assemble a team to get in there? Because you start looking at if you just send it over to an editor, and this is where I'd love to get your opinion on your side, because you send it to an editor, sometimes the editor needs the viewpoint of what an acquisition editor would bring. What are the guardrails that are set? And we have found that's worked very well. How do you think it differs when you get, let's say you got a manuscript assessment? I think we sent you over a sample copy. Would that help with your edits, or would that, what are your takes when you have that direction?
I think personally it would help. I recently published a novel and I got, wonderful assessments from people I trust in the business, including Warner Ross at ALLi. And they gave me tips for, here, this works, this doesn't work. What about this character? And it worked wonderfully. And they gave me clear marching orders. And that's what I try to do in my assessments. I look at big picture issues, and then I kind of move through the manuscript almost chapter by chapter with critique and recommendations. Before I do any of that, though, I also interview the author to get an idea of their voice and also what they hope to accomplish with the book. What are they trying to do? What message are they trying to get across? And what voice are they using? Can you tell me a little bit about the nuts and bolts of what an assessment involves at Izzard Inc.?
Yeah, usually we have an assessor who's been in the industry probably 20 or 30 years. They work at high levels. Their passion is for storytelling, and we found that they love making a difference with individual authors. So we usually get them through, and it's kind of a tough love phase. We really love the book. We really try to showcase what works, but we want to help authors understand maybe where it doesn't work before they go through the process of getting a review. Mm-hmm. And then we really try. I have a business background. I'm an alum of Harvard Business School and done quite a bit in strategy. And we try and take that and put that what I learned into the action plan. And that's where I find that's a little bit different. It's like, okay, we have an assessment. It's like, so what, now what?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it's like, yeah, this is the areas that you can rewrite before you hire an editor. These are the areas where maybe your mission or your vision isn't coming across, but yet we can still have, the cover designers actually review these too, so they can understand where it goes. And this becomes key too in a marketing campaign.
Mm-hmm.
So it really sets, at least we found, it sets the foundation for serious authors who really want to put the work into to have great content in their book.
Right. And so because you have a business background, you're also maybe looking toward not just the content of the book, but who's the audience and how is this going to sell? Is that something you consider at the editing phase?
It absolutely is, because if we're finding that the marketplace is, in publishing, the marketplaces are very competitive, but we want to sit and see where the differentiation is. If we find that, that hole in the market, and we go, okay, here's the top 10 books where this competes against, we can't just copy it. We need to make sure the team knows exactly where it fits to. And this really brings it together.
I'm glad to hear you say tough love, because that's one thing that I try to do. One of my mantras is I'm never mean, but always honest in my feedback. And one example, I recently had a client who wrote a memoir that was more like an autobiography. I was born here and right up into their current life, which, half of which nobody really cared about. The memoir part of it is what people cared about. So I gave him a roadmap to how to turn this from an autobiography. And unless you're a big star politician or, musician or movie star, nobody's going to read your autobiography unless you're family. How to turn that into a memoir that more people would be interested in. And within days of me giving him the assessment, he said, oh God, I just cut thousands of words. I'm merging chapters. I'm making changes. And he told me he did more work in 4 days than he did in the previous 6 months, because he finally knew what to work on and in what order. And for me, that's the value of an assessment. It's not just a critique. It gives authors clarity, confidence, and momentum. And it helps them make smarter decisions about what kind of help they'll need next.
Yeah, I think you just hit the real big reason to look at doing a manuscript assessment first. It's the time. That's exactly it. That's the repeatable scenario that an assessment offers. Is it just saved me months and months and months. Not everybody has access to folks like Orna Ross, who will sit and give feedback, like the example that you gave. The quality. So the quality of people too really matters. That's why I see this as such an important area for authors to take before they hire an editor, even experienced authors. I really believe this is the way to go. It's a much more cost-effective way to change and revise. And I can't tell you how many times the vision has changed or the messaging has changed, or we're able to say, hey, change this section, and this section, and you've got your goal, So yeah, it saves so much time. And I view it as a key element for those folks who need to dust off their manuscript and they don't know where to go, but it's just not there. And the assessments are the way to do it.
What form do your assessments take?
On our website, izzardinc.com, there is manuscript assessment examples. We're looking at about one that we have up there, anywhere from 14 to 16 pages. It's more than just, does this need developmental edit? And here are the examples, and here are the solutions. Here are the line editing examples and proofreading. But we talk about the summary. What's a paragraph summary in the book? What's working well? What's the purpose and impact? Kind of why you, why now? Are readers likely to be engaged? What's your narrative, voice, and tone? What's your style? And then this is the one I really love, is the section on manuscript readiness and publishing potential, where we give it a 0 out of 100 score on genre demand. Does this need a developmental edit, and why? Each has a couple of lines below it on why. Here's why it needs a proofread, and here's the current state for publishing. And then what's the forecast if you put an elite editor on the project and work with it? Where do we realistically expect it to be if we make the changes that have been outlined there? So that's the format. Then we talk a little bit about the primary issues, the top priorities for revision. Then we list the things to revise. And then it just comes to kind of a final assessment overview. It's like, let's get going on the next steps is what that's.
Is there a big difference between fiction and nonfiction in terms of what you look for in an assessment?
Yeah, and actually it's done by genre. So we actually do, as we're getting in and doing the assessment, we try and actually not just fiction, nonfiction, but politics. We try and run our assessments on what are some of the bestsellers in, let's say, young adult historical fiction, is a book we just worked on. We'd want to assess what's working in that particular genre and character development, things like that, versus maybe nonfiction is more fact-checking and, making sure both of them, yes, at the end of the day, yes, everything really is genre-based.
Yeah, yeah. And what about a mix between, content and writing quality? Do you kind of assess them both equally?
Yes. Yeah. We do assess both of them equally, but they both have to work together.
Have you ever faced a situation where the authors completely disagreed with it and said, no, you don't get me? Is that ever an issue?
Sometimes it's been an issue, and it's never been a complete issue. Sometimes, we are human, and our editors do maybe mix up a character or something like that. That's where we've seen the real pushback. But it's gotten so much better over the last few years that we really haven't seen people all up in arms. Mm-hmm. But we also look for the soft skills in authors too, as we bring authors in. It's less about writing ability and more about the willingness to take direction and build a team, and the humility that I think it takes to write a book. That's what we look for in the authors that we work with, because that's where we see the most amount of progress and gain. And when we see an author that takes a humble approach to their book and is willing to listen to feedback, those are the ones that almost every single time land in the top literary reviews with us. Those are the ones.
Those are the authors you want to work with too.
They are, and the team does too. And for some reason, they get you to work harder for them.
Now, what about the next step? I've had clients who, after I give them an assessment, say, okay, I'm going to disappear for 3 months, rewrite it and give it back to you. And some of them say, that sounds great. I don't want to do it. Can you help me do it? Is there a place for both of those kinds of authors?
Yeah, exactly. That happens. For the few that don't, we just go right into editing. We put together a proposal. We usually list 3 editors for them. We list why we like them, and we customize this proposal for the approach, what they can bring to the table, what are some of the other projects that they work with, and what authors say. And a lot of times we'll list maybe why they might not be a good fit for the project, because some may be 3 to 6 months out and they don't want to wait that long, but yet they're a good fit. That can happen too. So we really try to customize our proposal, and then we present their choice, their editor, with the top probably 4 or 5 things that we need focus on. Mm-hmm. And then we sit down and we meet and have chats and Zoom calls and things like that too, to make sure there are milestones and goals along the way to make sure they're getting the most out of it.
It's kind of a matchmaking service. Finding the right editor for the right author is awfully important, making sure that they work well together.
Exactly. That's a great example. When you get past that, you're looking at the proposal stage. That's exactly it. It's a matchmaking service, and who's going to pull through with the deadlines, who's going to be there when you have questions, which, some authors like face-to-face. Others would love to just do it in track changes in Word. So figuring those styles out is something that we try and do along the way as well.
Yeah. I do a combination of both. I was just today, I was editing something for a client, and I started doing a really, really long memo inside Word. And then I thought, well, no, let's have a Zoom call about this, rather than rewriting an essay about everything that the chapter needs.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just meeting the author where they're at in a way that you can make a difference. And that's what we want to do. I think we believe that everyone has the ability now to create a well-written story. It's not like it used to be. There's so many tools out there to help writers that the quality, I think, is going to increase over the next few years too. We're seeing it. It's amazing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So where are you in the sort of ecosystem? Do you do everything, including publishing, or do you get it ready for them to self-publish?
We do everything. We even do the publishing. We have 2 different distribution methods. We have hands-on, where an author can take it and run it themselves. Full service will run it with us, take just a small fee to do that, so they don't have more than one tax form at the end of the year and a whole bunch of statements. We do automated royalties. We even connect with some of the best marketing folks and teams. We had a nonfiction author come through and matched him with the same person who's done, New York Times #1 bestsellers. So we've really worked to create great content. But then after that, it's like, yeah, we have great content. We've seen Kirkus give great reviews, or Publishers Weekly give a great review. Now it's time to show that it's worth it to put money into marketing. And This is the kind of platform that we need to build. And, here are the outlets that we'd like to see, so we can, depending on if the author's going to do 1 book or 2 or 3 or 4, kind of depends on how we build that. So we focus on the latter half of the publishing process, but none of that's possible without a clear plan how to move forward. And that's where the assessment and our action plan really set authors up for long-term success.
What's your advice for authors who have their manuscript or a draft of their manuscript, and they're not sure if they should send it to you for an assessment yet? How do they know if they're ready?
If they're asking that question, I think they're ready. They're ready for an assessment. If they want somebody who truly cares and wants to help them out too, and it's not just another rejection pile. We're not about rejection. Everything about us is about solutions. How do we get it there? Here are the problems. How do we get it there? And I'm sure you work the same way. When you do it, it's really about making it become, yes, how is this something that somebody would want? We really try and take a top front list approach to every book that we work on. Yeah.
And I've taken things that were written on napkins in prison to people who are already on their 5th draft and everything in between.
But if you're asking that question and you've hit a roadblock and you don't know where to go, that's the perfect time to get an assessment.
Right. Well, Tim, thank you so much for the conversation. I appreciate how clearly you talked about the role of manuscript assessments and evaluations and how they can help authors make smarter decisions, especially early on. And thank you for appearing on Self-Publishing with ALLi.
Thank you so much, Howard. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tim. Bye. You've been listening to the editing and design stream of the Self-Publishing with ALLi podcast. This program is produced by the Alliance of Independent Authors. Find author advice, tips, and tools at our Self-Publishing Advice Center, selfpublishingadvice.org. And if you haven't already, we invite you to join our organization and become a self-publishing ally. You can do that at allianceindependentauthors.org.